First speaker in the session will be Cédric Defayet from EAP and IHES in Paris, and he's going to tell us about degeneracy, metacoupling, and disformal transformations. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. So hello, everybody, and I would like to thank the organizers again for this invitation, so especially Evgeny and Valerie. Hoping again that we'll soon see each other in a real world. So my talk is about degeneracy and matter couplings in the degenerate higher order scalar tensor theories. So it's based on this paper we published with Sebastian Garcia Sens, who was then my postdoc, and now is moving to China after some stay in Imperial College. And so the subject of the talk is to study in what sense the matter coupling can basically change or not the Hamiltonian counting of degrees of freedom in degenerate scalar tensor theories. So I will first introduce briefly these theories and why there could be potentially trouble with matter couplings, and then discuss our analysis in this game. Okay, so I guess there have been already a lot of talks on this theory, so I will be brief. So I will talk here about this DOST, meaning standing for degenerate higher order scalar tensor theories. That is, they are scalar tensor theories which have Euler-Lagrange equation of higher order, but which, thanks to constraints, meaning degeneracy, propagate less degrees of freedom than naively expected. And there are several roads to this theory which have been taken. And one sort of obvious road, in fact, uses disformal transformations. So these transformations were introduced, I guess, in our field by Bekenstein, probably. And they are defined as written here. So they are transformations which are in general invertible, although they can be cases where they are not, but let's forget about these cases so far, and which maps so a scalar and a metric to the same scalar and a new metric, where the new metric and the old metric are related by this relation, where phi mu is the first derivative of the scalar and x is the kinetic term of the scalar. So in fact, this transformation, as it's obvious from its form, implies in particular that the derivative of the tilde metric contains second derivative of the scalar, and this will be the root of the issue we are investigating here. So it means in particular that the Christoffel symbols of the theory with the tilde action generate, once you replace the tilde metric by the G metric, it will generate a higher derivative equivalent action, higher derivative, meaning here that it will be generating second derivative of phi arising just from this relation between Christoffels, right, which comes from simply this property here. Okay, so however, of course, if you just consider the gravitational action, the two actions should describe the same degrees of freedom. And as a consequence, one can be degenerate while the other is not, just by the mere relation between the two metrics. Okay, so, and this is one way to construct degenerate a higher order scalar tensor theory. You start from a non-degenerate one, you do this disformal transformation, and you end up with a degenerate one. So the simplest example maybe is general relativity. So you consider pure general relativity, which contains obviously one metric and zero scalar. You do a disformal transformation, and you end up in this theory, which was dubbed Veil gravity by Nathalie Dorel and her collaborator, which is the same as general relativity, but in disguise, right, obviously, because it is higher order. And more, you can do the same game with Horndeski theory, which is well known to contain one metric and one scalar. And then by a disformal transformation, you end up in some class of DOST, as was realized in particular by these people in 2014. Okay, So there is a zoo of those series, and this figure is taken from a nice review by David Langlois. There is a bunch of different doses that are sort of imbricated like Russian dolls, and some of these doses are known indeed to be related by this formal transformation to Horndeski theory, just as I explained. And so what is the trouble then with matter coupling in this game? Well, it is the fact that this picture that I just showed is nice, but it can be a little bit misleading if you want to classify this theory, because it, in fact, it shows visually, or it sort of indicates visually that some theories are different, while if you just consider the gravitational part of the action, they are identical, just they are related by invertible change of coordinates. And so the real point of classifying this theory should be coming from considering the matter coupling, right? And so this is the issue I'm addressing here. So one example is Vell gravity indeed. So you start with Vell gravity, and then you ask yourself, how should I couple this to matter? So if I start with a minimal coupling in general relativity, obviously this formal transformation will generate a non-minimal coupling, right? So it will nonetheless not only be veiled in the action, but also the coupling to matter will be non-minimal. So this should keep the equivalence between the two theories, but this is not what usually is done in this dose. What people usually do is that they minimally couple the degenerate theory, and if you go back now to this frame, this I will be calling this a minimal coupling frame. And then if you go back to the initial sort of variables by using the inverse this formal transformation, the gravity part, of course, will be standard, but we will have a non-minimal coupling in this theory now, in this general relativity. It will not be general relativity because it will be non-minimally coupled to matter, right? So this very non-minimal coupling can change, in fact, the number of degrees of freedom. That is done in vacuum in the dosed theory. So indeed, consider, for example, a mere scalar phi, which is coupled minimally to the Vell general relativity. So in the minimally coupled frame, this is the action for this mere scalar. So you have this plus gravity in general relativity in disguise, right? And so then you do this formal transformation. So you choose one cell with simple form, so that in the non-minimally coupled frame, you have this action. So now you have resurrected, at least in the action, the scalar of the this formal transformation, right? It appears non-minimally coupled. It appears coupled to the matter scalar, right? And so if you write the equation of motion, you see that this propagates two scalars, right? So so that this coupling to matter has resurrected this scalar which was absent in the veiled pure gravity, or in the absence of matter frame, right? So the lessons to be drawn from this is that the even minimal coupling of a degenerate scalar tensor theory can spoil its degeneracy, right? Okay, so a crucial question for the dosed ID is whether or not the matter coupling in general preserves the counting of degrees of freedom that is done in the absence of matter. And I would even say that it is a very crucial question after one has realized that some of these non-degenerate theory via field redefinition in vacuum. Because if you just look at the gravity part of the action, those two theories should be equivalent.
Yeah, the talk is about the issue of studying the matter coupling in dosed model. And so I get some motivation of why it's interesting. So this dosed model, I recall that they are degenerate scalar tensor theory, and a simple and some of them are obtained by just disformally transforming a non-degenerate theory as written here, so into some theory where the gravitational part of the action is degenerate, right? And so because of this knowledge, one can expect, as I was arguing, some problem with coupling, possibly, because of the fact that this formal transformation will contain, will imply that the derivative of the metric will contain second derivative of the scalar field phi, as also you can read from this relation between the Christoffel of the two metric. And I gave an example of such a problematic coupling with Veil gravity, which is just general relativity. This formally transformed to some action which contains now a scalar, but this action obviously is degenerate because it's just equivalent to GR. However, if you couple this Veil gravity minimally to matter, obviously, when you go back to the minimally coupled frame, you can resurrect the scalar via the coupling to matter. And so an example of this can be just seen by coupling just a simple scalar. And then so if you go to the non-minimally coupled frame, you see that this initially minimally coupled scalar is now coupled also to phi, the scalar of the gravitational sector, and the equation of motion shows that it propagates 2 degrees of freedom. So the lesson is that one should maybe think about studying the coupling to matter of this degenerate scalar tensor theory in order to see if they are consistent. And so I was introducing, I think I went to this point, I was introducing what we call here consistent coupling. So a consistent coupling to DOST is a coupling such that the minimal coupling prescription preserves the number of degrees of freedom of the extended gravity sector in the absence of matter. Or you can say it another way, that the total number of degrees of freedom, that is matter plus extended gravity, stays the same once matter and gravity are minimally coupled. And it's not obvious that it's possible, that it's always true. And in fact, even in general relativity, the question arises when you have matter, which is having some constraints. It's known if the fields are derivatively coupled, that this coupling can change the counting, which arise in the absence of coupling to gravity. So I'm going to discuss this now with 3 examples of matter couplings. So before doing that, I will just summarize in a nutshell the Hamiltonian analysis of DOST in the absence of matter. So this, I think the first paper which tries such a Hamiltonian analysis was this paper of myself, Gilles Esposito-Fazeres, and Daniel Stier. But here I'm going to use this very nice paper of Karim Noui and David Langlois, which did an extended analysis of this issue, of this Hamiltonian analysis of DOST. So consider the most general quadratic into second derivative DOST. This has this action here with some specific form, which does not matter so much for the analysis here. And then you introduce a vector field, which will represent the first derivative of phi via a Lagrange multiplier. And you do an ADM split of the metric. So after some calculation, here is what you find. We are not going to explain all the term, but just stress that the kinetic quadratic part of this action is containing term which is quadratic into V star. So V star is containing a derivative of this S star, which itself is copying for component and projection of the vector. Okay? And then you have your usual extrinsic curvature square. And then you have a coupling between them via this B term. And so the DOST degeneracy condition has some specific form, which is written here, where B is this function here, which does not, the detail of it does not matter. Of course, one can work it out, and David and Karim did work it out. But for us, let's forget about the detail and just remember that there is this constraint, or this degeneracy condition rather, which will lead to a constraint indeed. In fact, if you compute canonical momenta, so you have the pure gravity sector, where the lab, the shift, and the 3 metric, as usual. And then you have the scalar sector, which contains the scalar and the vector here. which replace the first derivative of the scalar. So this leads to 11 primary constraints. So among these 11 primary constraints, you have 4 first-class constraints, which are coming from this piece and which are just the usual constraints associated to Diffeo invariance. Then you have 6 primary constraints which do not generate secondary constraints and which are associated basically to this Lagrange multiplier game. And then you have this 11th constraint, which is this one, which comes from the dose degeneracy condition. And this psi constraint, it does generate a secondary constraint, which is, both of them are second class. And as a result, here is the counting. So you start with the metric, the vector, and the scalar, that is to say 30 Hamiltonian degrees of freedom. You have 8 first-class constraints, which are associated with Diffeo invariance. So you count them twice. You have these 6 trivial second class associated with the Lagrange multiplier, and you have these 2 second class which are associated with the degeneracy. And so at the end of the day, it gives you 1 graviton, so 3 degrees of freedom, 3 Lagrangian degree of freedom, 1 graviton, and 1 scalar, as you want for dose theory. Okay, so far so good. Now let's switch to coupling to matter. And as I sort of motivated at the beginning of my talk, we expect to have something non-trivial happening when the coupling is derivative because of this argument that derivative coupling will involve Christoffel symbol which themselves, if you transform back the theory to a frame where the matter is non-minimally coupled, say, will contain second derivative of the scalar. Okay, so we need derivatively coupled field if we want to have something bad happening. So, of course, the vector field is a candidate, but the thing is that obviously the vector field, the standard vector field, because it depends on exterior derivative, it does not contain any Christoffel. So we want to maybe have something like a non-canonical vector to study the consistency of this coupling. For a scalar, we need also a Christoffel symbol, so we need a 2 derivative theory like a Galilean, and this one could be problematic. And for spin 1, these are also potentially problematic because they contain the spin connection, which contain derivative of the Vierbein, and hence will contain derivative of the scalar again. So like a mere spin 1/2 could be problematic. So let's study this these various cases, in turn. So first, a non-canonical vector. So of course, this is what we consider as an example. So of course, this has 4 degrees of freedom and it's pathological. But for the issue of discussing the consistency of the coupling, this is not an issue because this is an issue which is completely independent of the pathological or non-pathological nature of the considered matter field. And so we did a full-fledged Hamiltonian analysis of this setup and found out indeed that the constraint that was present originally from the degeneracy is lost. So it's no longer a constraint. And as a result, the counting goes as follows. Instead of the counting I presented before, you have this new counting where now you have more fields. Of course, we have vector in addition to the initial field. That's 38 Hamiltonian degrees of freedom. You have still the first class constraint associated to Diffeo invariance, still the 6 second class constraint associated to the Lagrange multiplier, but you have lost the degeneracy constraint. And as a result, you have 8 Lagrangian degrees of freedom, which is 1 graviton, 1 vector, and 2 scalar. So that's too much. And this shows that the coupling is not consistent. So it's not like in general relativity. In general relativity, you could couple a sig vector field consistently from this perspective, while here you cannot. So cubic Galilean, other example. So here again, I'm working in the minimal coupling frame. So I have an extra scalar field pi coupled minimally to the metric in this frame. Then to do the Hamiltonian analysis, I use the same trick as before. I put the action in first order form by introducing some vector, which will replace the derivative of the scalar. And then I do the Hamiltonian analysis. So I still have the sort of trivial constraint associated to DFO and presence of Lagrange multiplier. And in addition, now I have other constraints, primary constraints, which are second class, which are those two constraints. And this one, the first one, is replacing the constraint which came initially from the degeneracy of the theory. But now the point is that those two constraints, they do not commute together, so they do not generate secondary constraints. So the coupling is the following. Now, instead of the initial one, you have, again, more field. You have the vector and the scalar. So that's 40 Lagrangian, Hamiltonian degrees of freedom. You have this first class constraint. You have this trivial second class. You have new second class primary constraint, but not they do not generate a secondary constraint. And as a result of the counting, you have, you see 5 Lagrangian degrees of freedom, which is again too much because you have 1 graviton and 3 scalar. So you have resurrected again the pathological scalar, and the coupling again is not consistent. So this is unlike, again, general relativity, where you can couple consistently cubic Galilean or any Ornetsky theory. Here you cannot. Okay, so let's switch now to last and more. So you can, of course, argue maybe that the preceding examples are not very physical, even though people have put a lot of effort to make Ornetsky theory interesting, right? And but let's switch to spin 1/2. Spin 1/2, of course, is more interesting. And, I mean, we know that spin 1/2 exists. So let's consider, to simplify the setting, like a Majorana spinor, sorry, but we can do it as well for a Dirac spinor. And so with a standard kinetic term. And so this kinetic term, it involves, as I said previously, the spin connection, which contains derivative of the Vierbein. And for that reason, you expect something non-trivial could happen. And in fact, we considered more generally the most general theory for such a spinor with at most 1 derivative. So you can write other terms, in mass terms, etc. Also derivative term with quartic structure. But we consider all this theory, and we did a full Hamiltonian analysis. So classical Hamiltonian analysis, meaning here, following in particular this, I think, pioneer paper of Yvonne Choquet-Bruat, such an analysis can be made assuming that all fields, including the bosonic field, are supernumber valued. So they mean that they take their value in some infinite dimensional Grassmann algebra with infinite set of anti-commuting generators. So the supernumber of this, which I mean, they are supernumber values. So the supernumber are usually decomposed in a part which is called the body, which do not contain any generator, and then an infinite sum of polynomial into the generator, which are this infinite set usually is called the Saul. And the Saul is decomposes itself into levels, right? Level 1 contains 1 generator, level 2 contains product of 2 generators, etc. So this is standard stuff. And what one has to do is that one has to assume that the fermionic field have non-vanishing odd level components, and the bosonic field have non-vanishing even level components. So they not only have a body, but they also have a Saul, which is infinite sum of even level. And so if you do that, you can do a Hamiltonian analysis, but which we did, and which is rather cumbersome. So I'm not going to discuss the detail of it. Instead, I'm going to discuss a toy mechanical model, which I think captures the result and the physics. So let's consider this model. So this model is a mechanical, if you want, Grassmann algebra valued model. So pi and phi are commuting field. So they are toy scalar tensor sector. So they would represent maybe the metric and the scalar. Then you have anti-commuting field, which is a toy fermionic matter sector. So this part, which I'm pointing here, is just the free part of the action. And then there is a coupling, which is, as you see, is a derivative coupling. It contains the fermion, the scalar, and 2 derivatives acting on one of the scalar. So this derivative interaction, it mimics the derivative interaction with the scalar which can appear after a deformal transformation. So in spirit, this has to be considered as the Majorana-Fermion theory, but written in the non-minimal coupling scale, frame, sorry. Okay. And so if you look at the free theory, that is to say, if you discard this interaction, obviously you have 4 first-order equations, and so you can say you have 4 Hamiltonian degree of freedom. But now let's look at the full theory, and here is the Euler-Lagrange equation, right? Written from this theory. And so at face value, if you count the derivative, you find 6 derivatives. So you expect to have 6 integration constants when G is non-zero. So that means 6 variables, 6 Hamiltonian variables, right? And so you expect that this coupling is indeed exciting new degree of freedom. However, this counting is not correct. And one should pay attention to the fact that the field has super number valued. And so you should decompose, what you should do is you should decompose the field into their Grassmann algebra levels. And then you should analyze this system level by level. So at level 0, at body level, you only have the bosonic part. And the bosonic part are just first order equation. You see on the right-hand side here, everything here will only contribute at higher level, right? So at body level, you have 3 bosonic part, and so you have 2 integration constants, which are C number for this bosonic part. Then at level 1, you have the fermionic free part equal to some interaction, but this interaction vanishes by virtue of the level 0 equation of motion. So the level 1 again is free and has only 2 integration constants again. And level 2 now again is easy to get, and you have an interaction term here. But the point is that this interaction term it's only containing level 1 and 0 terms, which in addition are 0 here. So you have again 2 integration constants at level 2. And in fact, you can easily show that this extends to all levels. So at all levels, you have just 2 integration constants, and the counting at each level is exactly the same as that of free theory. So this Grassmann algebra structure, in fact, forces you somehow to consider the higher derivative interaction as in perturbation theory. So that is to say, this interaction does not introduce new degree of freedom. It's just exactly like it was. It could be, it could be considered in perturbation theory. And the same conclusion is reached if it was done a Hamiltonian analysis, again paying attention to the Grassmann algebra structure, as well as we did for the real fermionic field. We found that there is no extra degree of freedom generated by this coupling, despite the fact that this coupling contains derivative and higher derivative. So this means, at least if you trust this Grassmann algebraic Hamiltonian analysis, that this matter coupling to DOST is indeed consistent, and that's okay for DOST. Okay, so let me conclude now. So we have shown that the consistent coupling of matter to quadratic DOST is not trivial. It fails to be consistent for some matter field that can be consistently coupled in general relativity. For the fermionic case, the thing is the Hamiltonian analysis forces you to consider the higher derivative as if it was a perturbation term, where anyway in perturbation theory we do not care usually about higher derivative because we don't consider this to introduce extra degree of freedom usually, right? And this implies also in particular that various models can be envisaged like such a model where you have curvature to the power n, some mass dependence, if you want, some curvature dependent mass term for spin 1/2 would be okay as far as degree of freedom is concerned, right? From this very same argument. We have also not done it in full generality. Somehow we have not done it for non-quadratic DOST. That would be an interesting question. And I would like to thank you for your attention and apologize for my previous bad connection. Thank you.
Cedric, thanks a lot for your very nice talk, but very complicated, I would say.
Sorry.
It's the first number with a soul I have seen. And I think we have some questions.
Okay.
Valery, go ahead.
Cedric, there are no classical fermions, there are no Grassmannian fermions.
Sure.
All fermions are operators, right?
Mhm.
So how would the appearance of the extra degree of freedom, how can you foresee it to occur if you are doing the, you know, quantum?
It's
quantum-
exactly.
Quantum discussion of this system.
It's exactly a good question for me. I don't have an answer to this. I just again, what we did is in fact that's what I wanted to say that as well. I'm sorry, but that indeed, because there is no classical equivalent of fermions, somehow you should do it a quantumly. But at least here we can do a classical, Hamilton analysis, meaning that we use this Grassmann algebra formalism. And that was done in the past, you know, for example, supergravity, right, by Yvonne Choquet-Bruard. And this is the outcome of it is what I explained here. That is from the classical point of view. That's why there is comma here. I mean, quotation mark. There is no problem with. There is no introduction of extra degree of freedom. So now my wish would be to understand this somehow, as you said, from a quantum point of view, and I don't have a clear answer to this question.
Okay, so you haven't thought in terms of, say, balls and the Green function or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, right. Yeah, and so my guess somehow is that this Grassmann algebra structure is built in order to lead to a good, you know, quantum equivalence once you quantize the theory using this structure now. And so that I don't think that the quantum, the quantization of this theory should give a different result from this classical quote unquote analysis. But I would like to compute this in some way, and we have not done it yet. Because this is very worrisome. If it fails, of course, if there is something wrong with this analysis, this is very bad news for DOST.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, I see there is a next question by Zhenya. Zhenya, go ahead.
Cedric, I have a little bit, you know, not very well formulated question. So this is about, I agree with you that when you presented 3 different cases which may lead to inconsistency, it looks naively that the 3rd example of fermions would lead to inconsistency. So what I don't understand is how can I, you know, intuitively get the idea which you tried to explain, but I didn't get it. So,
sorry.
So sorry. So why in the end it works like you say, it's like perturbative?
Exactly. Yeah.
So can you be a little bit more, you know, elaborate on that?
Well, you know, unfortunately, I don't have a clear answer because it's really, you know, it's really a consequence. It's very simple consequence of this Grassmann algebra structure, as you understood probably, right? Because if you look at the system, what you do is you decompose it level by level, right? And so this level by level decomposition is forcing you to consider this just as an interaction. So it will never generate extra integration constants. And so maybe it's telling us that we should not, you know, we don't have the right somehow to consider this term quantum mechanically as something else than some interaction, right? Some perturbative expansion.
So and so the difference between this case and the bosonic case is that
the difference is that is due to the Grassmann algebra structure. So for the bosonic case, because the bosonic case have a body, you see, for example, if you would consider such a term here with just pure bosonic term, this would have a body component, 0 level component containing higher derivative. right? So this term, if chi, psi, pi would be bosonic, this would be a pure higher derivative at level 0, and this would generate an extra degree of freedom at level 0. But here, because you are not considering boson, but in fact fermion, you see these terms, they will only contribute at higher and higher order. Every time you consider a given order here, you would only have contribution from the lower order, strictly lower than the order on the left-hand side. And this, as a result, it does not introduce new degrees of freedom. It is just a perturbation theory term, right? It's just like if you would do standard perturbation theory in a higher derivative theory, you can, provided there is a free kinetic part, right? Then you can do perturbation theory and in fact, as we did together somehow, right? Some time ago, it does not generate any constant of integration, right?
Okay, I see. So, but in the end, it means, let's say, if I couple standards model to DOST, so your analysis tells me that nothing wrong will happen, right?
Right.
Okay.
So far, so good.
Good. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Okay, as I don't see any further questions, I may ask Cedric very, very quickly. So do you consider only the setup when, if you generated DOST by substituting this formal transformation into Einstein-Riemann, then in the matter sector, the coupling remains normal?
No, sorry, I'm sorry. In fact, we consider the full general DOST, but then I try to motivate the possible problematic coupling with the example of those DOST which can be disformally transformed to non-degenerate theory. Because for this theory, we see there is a potential problem, right? Just from my reasoning and the example of Weyl gravity. Of course, Weyl gravity is some super degenerate case somehow, but it shows that there is a potential problem, and we showed, in fact, for general theory, not only those which are related to the non-degenerate theory, we showed indeed that there is problems for, as I said, for the non-canonical vector, for the Horndeski, etc.
Okay. Thanks. I think I don't see any further questions.
May I ask one more question?
Oh, yeah. Please.
Cedric, what would happen at the level of the second order action, quadratic action for perturbations about, say, cosmological but non-trivial background with, cosmological symmetries, time dependent, nothing else. In the classical, in the theories with classical fields like vector fields or pi field, your previous two examples, what will be the, how would you see the appearance of the extra degree of freedom?
Well, I suspect you just look at quadratic perturbation on this background, and you would see them appearing. Because this is just the result of the Hamiltonian analysis, right? So if you consider, for example, imagine you consider a DOST coupled to a Galilean, right? And then look at some cosmological background. Look at perturbation on this background. You should see some extra degree of freedom there.
Is that because there is a derivative coupling between DOST?
Yes, exactly. Because there is a derivative coupling between the Galileans, I mean, or the cubic Galilean, or whatever Horndeski theory. You would have a derivative coupling, and generically we expect this to generate this loss of this secondary constraints. So in fact, I don't know if anybody has studied the possibility to get multi-DOST somehow. you know, this indicates that it might be highly non-trivial, right? So it might be that in some cases you can succeed, but it will require some tuning again, likely.
Okay.
So
By the way,
what you
oh
mean?
yeah,
Sorry, that you cannot just take two DOST and glue them together.
Well, no, 2DOST would be even worse, right? Because 2DOST, you would need to preserve the two degeneracy condition of the 2DOST. Here we are saying even this theory is not degenerate, right? Cubic Galilean is not degenerate, but it makes it loses already the degeneracy condition of the DOST sector, right?
Yeah, I understand. Okay, thanks.
so I have a very not directly related question, but exactly as Valery said that there are no classical fermions. That's definitely true. I'm just looking at many papers where people try to use normal complex Dirac fermions, and of course then the energy is unbounded from below. We don't see it in nature, but I'm a bit puzzled. So on one hand, of course, there are no classical fermions. On the other hand, clearly there could be big quadratic invariants, right? Like I don't know, like very, very naively, like neutron stars are built from fermions, but they're almost classical, right?
No.
No, but not the.
Why do we have classical bosonic fields? Electromagnetic wave. What is
Of course, large occupation numbers, that's for sure.
Right, this is the large occupation number, which is impossible for fermions.
Right. No, that's of course crystal clear. Just the question is how to think about it, because most matter around us is kind of classical and it's built out of fermions in reality. So that's a bit kind of.
You don't think in terms of classical fermion field. You think in terms of occupation number, the distribution functions, etc.
Right. Okay. Thanks.